All right, welcome back to round six, and today we're talking about the graph. This is Brain Fried, where I give you my own personal engineer's perspective on some of the most interesting projects in the blockchain industry, blockchain world, whatever you want to say. This is purely educational. It is not intended to be financial advice. Let's start off real quick with what is the current GRT price, just for the sake of completeness. 74 cents. Okay. One thing that I started looking into was actually delegating to an indexer. So if we remember what we talked about in the first video that I made, we talked about all the roles that people play in the graph ecosystem. We had an indexer, we had a delegator, we had a curator. There's one more, right? I can't think of it off the top of my head. But right now we're focusing on indexing, which basically means serving out queries to the consumer, and then we're focused on delegating, which is basically staking GRT, staking money to the indexer. The graph has a partner, kind of a partnership, or has a grant for a group that develops the academy, the graph.academy, this URL here, and they're building up some documentation on how to better understand like how to build subgraphs and how to start indexing, things like that. They're building out the resources, and they have some grants for people to join in. If that's something that you might be interested in, you can visit them and maybe apply for one of their grants if you're knowledgeable in that aspect. So they do give some information on how to delegate and how the rewards are distributed. I'm not going to go into it, but one thing I did want to point out is I think in the first video we went through the documentation and we're like, oh, what's the inflation? Is this an inflationary token or is it a deflationary token? Because we didn't know the formula for how the rewards were created. At least I didn't see it in the documentation. But according to the Academy, the graph.academy, the protocol of inflation is dynamic to be set to 3% annually. Preferably, I would like to, if we're holding tokens for kind of to hope that they increase in value, it's better that it's a deflationary token. But this is more of an infrastructure component that we're looking at, and I see it as a very necessary tool in the future. I think that might be the only thing I want to point out in this document. One thing is that we need to know is that we distribute, the delegators will receive their cut once the allocation is closed. So that's one thing to know. There is some videos online about how to choose indexers, and it can get pretty intense math-wise if you want to dive into it like that. For me, I didn't have any interest in doing that type of formulation, like the statistics and all that, but they do give you some tools. So we're still at the Graph Academy, and I'm just on, let's see, they go into how to choose a profitable indexer. There's a delegator guide. And there's a video that you can watch. It's very helpful. It basically just walks through everything that this document walks through. And we're going to kind of step through what I was looking at. This was the Explorer that we're going to jump over to in just a second. So there's these three concepts. We can just briefly explain them here. So the stake owned, we'll see terms like that thrown around on the Explorer, which just means how much stake is the indexer putting up. We already know that the barrier to entry to become an indexer is 100,000 GRT minimum. So anything that is owned by the indexer should be a minimum 100,000 GRT. Their delegated stake is how much is being delegated, pretty straightforward. And then their allocated stake is how much of that delegation are they actually allocated towards the subgraph that they're indexing. So it can get a little complicated, but I want to try to keep it very simple, high level for this video, because I do have to limit these videos to 15 minutes for YouTube, whatever they're limiting me for some reason. Max capacity is the maximum allowable delegation they're allowed to receive, or basically they're allowed to productively receive. So if they get over delegated, then it will diminish the returns, or I don't know if diminish is the right word. Available capacity is how much left they're able to allocate without going over. And the revenue is just the total earnings. Basically, they break it into query fee revenue and indexer rewards. So query fees is what the consumer is paying to query that subgraph, and then the rewards is what the graph ecosystem is rewarding the indexer for indexing that subgraph. So yeah, here's the caveat. If an indexer is over-delegated, the rewards are diluted. This is indicated by a negative number and a star next to the available delegation capacity. And then we're going to use some tools. So I'm using graphscan.io. Some of these websites are not live anymore. I'm not sure why. I don't know if they're just not maintained or if they got cut off or what, but graphscan.io is live. And then they have an advanced level comparison where they give you a spreadsheet and you can just plug in some numbers and get some rewards that, or get your calculation done that way. We can look at it real quick. This is the spreadsheet, and you can play with it if you prefer this way. I don't like spreadsheets, so I don't prefer that way. We're just skimming through, nothing, don't want to waste a lot of time on this. So if we go to graphscan.io, we're kind of beginning the process of choosing an indexer to delegate to. And the reason why we want to delegate is either because we believe in the indexer or we believe in the subgraph they're indexing. If they're indexing multiple, then we believe in all their subgraphs that they're indexing, so we want to support them. And then also to earn some GRT from staking, right? GraphScan.io tool is pretty nice. It just gives you a list of all the indexers, and it bases its calculation, your estimated daily reward, as if you were to contribute 10,000 GRT. We can change that in the settings. So 10,000 by default, let's say if I plan to contribute maybe 5,000 delegation, then it'll update and say this is what you'll be looking at. Some of these accounts, indexer addresses, have an ENS set up, like an ENS, the Ethereum name service, where they basically mapped their numerical account into kind of a human readable name. It doesn't necessarily mean that one's better than the other. It just means that they made that step. So I'm still learning this numbering type thing of like what's normal, what's safe, what's risky. And I've been kind of talking to some people on Discord, and some of these indexers can screw the delegator over by basically doing what's called a sandwich attack. And I'm kind of fuzzy on the details, but it seems like if they'll change their reward cut before closing the allocation, it seems like the delegator gets 0. But then it sounded like that was something that happened early on when they first started, and once people got called out on it, then it kind of stopped. But just to be safe, I talked to them. I said, "What do you recommend for indexing somebody?" They said, "Index someone that has a fairly longer history of indexing, where you can get their metrics, and we'll look at some of those in a second. And then index someone who is like fairly active in the Discord community or something like that." And so I was finding someone. I found someone, and I messaged them. I said, "Hey, I'm indexing you," and they were like, "Yeah, just let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them," things like that. So although this estimated APR of 117% sounds awesome, or even 21,000% sounds awesome, I'm very suspicious of things like that sound too good to be true. So for me, I couldn't find these people on Discord, or I couldn't see their stake time, or their indexing time is very low. You can see where they're indexing from, Bucharest, I don't know. And you can see their allocations. I mean, they do have a fair amount of allocations starting from April, but I just don't know. It seemed too good to be true, so I was thrown off. And you can see the other delegators too, and you can see that only 2 delegators have a current delegation, I guess, of 5.5K, 2.1K. And if it really was 117% return, I don't know. I mean, it seems like they would have more delegators in this. But then there's the other side of it, is like, are they trying to just kind of advertise themselves, and that's might be the only way to do it? I don't know. So I'm kind of uncertain. So for my first time, I'm playing it safe, and I'm doing, someone I can contact, and maybe someone that gives me a little less rewards, but someone that won't, screw me over, hopefully. So that's going to be down here. One of these guys, maybe Stake Service. I think I've seen them on Discord. Notify, I've seen them on Discord. I think Maple, no, I might have seen that. You just have to go into the Discord community. You can see some of their names that matches their ENS name here. So after that, after you kind of pick one and you're kind of comfortable with it, maybe you reached out to them and you ask them like what their strategy is or whatnot. And I went into the Graph Explorer, and you can go into the Indexers tab, and you can search them by name. So let's pick one. Say maybe Stake Service, Stake Service. I don't see him. Okay, don't see Stake Service. KY2, KY. There he is. KY. What happened? I literally saw it. This search is not KY2, not E. There it is. And then this is where we can actually choose to delegate or not. And then it gives you all the information you need before you delegate. Okay, so let's go through some of this information. I'm gonna have to stop this here because I have a 15-minute time limit. I'm gonna go over by just a minute, and then maybe I'll be able to cut it down and when I edit it or something. Actually, this is probably a good place to cut it. So I'm gonna cut it here and then we're gonna come back.